Hi everyone. Today we're going to cover lesson 13 and this will help you with your lesson 13 homework in My Math Lab and also will help you to be able to do your quiz number 6. Quiz number 6 covers lessons 12 and 13, so hopefully by the end of this you'll have watched all the videos for lesson 12 and 13 and you guys will do really well on the quiz. Okay, so today we're actually going to be concluding our discussion on decimals. As you can see here, I've got lesson 13 labeled, and we are covering chapter 5, section 4 through 5.7. And chapter 5 in the ebook is all about decimals. So today we're finishing it. This is the end of decimal discussions. And so if you have your calculators, please make sure they're real close to you, that they're handy, because we're going to be doing a lot of calculator stuff today with them as well. I will show you very briefly how to do certain things by hand, but again, for the most part, you guys will probably just opt to use the calculator, especially because you are allowed to use it on everything for the rest of the class, and then of course any math course you take in the future at Tri-C as well. Okay, so here we go. The very first thing you're going to see in the homework over lesson 13 is dividing with decimals. So the directions will probably just look like this. It'll probably just say divide the following. Okay, so it'll probably just say divide the following. And so let's just dive right in. I don't have any definitions for you to start off with today. So we're just going to start off with example number 1, 6 into 27.6. Now, for the first two examples that we do together, I am going to show you how to do them on the calculator, of course, which is going to be very easy, very fast. And then I'm also going to show you how to do them by hand, just for those of you that want to do them by hand. Again, this is not a necessary skill that you guys have, but I just wanted to throw it out there and make sure that those of you that want to know how feel comfortable doing these by hand. So here's our first example. And so what I'm going to do is next to this, I'm just going to show you what you would do on the calculator. So I'm just going to say on calc, because the order does matter here. You need to make sure you know, is it 6 divided by 27.6 or is it the other way around, 27.6 divided by 6? Hopefully you remember from the very beginning of the semester that it is actually whatever number is inside this division symbol, that number comes first. So on the calculator, you're going to want to make sure you put in 27.6 divided by 6 in that order. Otherwise, it will mess you up. So when you do that, I'll just show you on my graphing calculator that I have here. When you do that, 27.6 divided by 6, and then you hit equals. I want to make sure I don't have too much glare there. You end up there with a 4.6. Okay, so that's going to be your final answer for this one, 4.6. And really, any calculator will work when you're doing these problems. So 4.6, final answer there. Occasionally the questions will ask you to round. This one did not, but we will do some where we have to do that. So your answer is just exactly what the calculator shows you, 4.6. All right, let me show you again very briefly by hand how you would do this for those of you interested. So what you would do is, let me rewrite the problem. Okay, so really the only thing you have to look at, the real important thing is this number right here, the number that you're dividing by, the number that's on the outside of the division symbol. So if that number has a decimal in it, you have to move the decimal all the way to the very end, the very right end of the entire number. And however many places you move this decimal, you have to move this decimal as well. So it all depends on this number right here. Now in this problem, the number 6, there is no decimal. I mean, technically there's always a decimal right there, but it's already at the end. So we don't have to do any decimal moving prior to beginning this problem. So what we're gonna do is just look inside here and we say, well, we do have a decimal there. Wherever that decimal ends up, you have to make sure that you put that decimal right above it. Keep it in a vertical column in your answer. Otherwise, of course, that could mess up your final answer. And so now you just do it the same way we've been doing division since the very first week of the semester. And so you say, what do you multiply 6 by to get a number very close to 27 without going over? So the highest you can get is a 4. So 4 times 6, 24. Subtract those numbers, you get a 3. And then of course you guys know you're not done because you still have a 6 here. So you have to bring the 6 down. So now you've got a 36, and you ask yourself one more time, what do I have to multiply this 6 by to get 36, or a number real close to it without going over? And it does so happen that we can put a 6 there and we get a nice perfect result here. 6 times 6 is 36. Subtract the 2 and we have a remainder of 0. So you can see here that your final answer, 4.6, matches our final answer that we got on the calculator. Now I do want to point out one thing for those of you that want to attempt this by hand. Let's say this number right here was something besides 0, and that could happen. If that happens, let's pretend for a moment this number was a 2. Then what you would have to do is add another 0. You'd have to put like a 0 here because you're allowed to add as many zeros as you want. You might remember that from lesson 12. I can make as many zeros at the end of a decimal that I want. It doesn't change the number. So if I put a 0 here, and again, if we're pretending there's a 2 here, then I would have to bring down the 0. I'm writing this kind of lightly just to show you we're not actually doing this, but you bring the 0 down, and so then this number would be 20 here, right? Again, we're pretending that's a 0, 20. So then you'd say, what do I multiply 6 by to get a number super close to 20 without going over? The number would be 3, and then you'd subtract, and you'd keep going and keep going, and you'd keep adding zeros as many times as you would need to do that until either you get a 0 for your remainder, then you're allowed to stop, or until you notice that your decimal starts repeating. If you start getting like 4.6222222, and you're like, wait, I keep getting 2, it's gonna go forever like this. If that happens, then you can end the problem and you know that your answer is 4.6. Then you would write 2 with a little bar over it. We're gonna get to that in a little bit. We're gonna talk about that bar. That's gonna show itself again later on in this lesson. But I just wanted to point out that that's what you would have to do. If your remainder is not a 0, you have to keep adding zeros here and bringing them down until your remainder eventually is a 0, or until you get a repeating decimal that just keeps going and you keep going in circles. Then you can stop at that point. Okay, so that's how you do example number 1, division with a calculator and division by hand. So let's do one more where we do it both ways. I'm going to do 0.42 into 3.066. Okay, so here's our next example. So on the calculator, on calc, remember order is super important here. We take whatever number is under the division symbol first into the calculator. So in this case, it's going to be 3.066 divided by 0.42. Okay, in that order. When you do that on your calculator, you get 7.3. I'll just save you some time. Hopefully you have your calculator with you as you're watching this video and you just put that in and you got the same result as me. 7.3 is the final answer. Make sure, of course, you hit equals in your calculator so that it gives you that result. Okay, let's talk about how to do this by hand. This will be the last one that we do by hand. So let me just write here by hand, and then I'm going to go ahead and set this up just like the one above. I'm going to rewrite the problem. Okay, so we end up with this. All right, now in this case, this one is slightly different than the last example because you'll notice that the number we're dividing by this time does have a decimal in it. So you might remember a second ago I mentioned if that happens, you have to move the decimal all the way to the right of the problem. So that means you have to take this decimal and move it 2 places so that it ends up right there. You want to move it to there. But if you move it on the outside, you have to move it on the inside the same number of places. So that means this decimal is also going to be moved 2 places to right there. So if I were you, I might rewrite the problem because it kind of looks messy when this happens. So I would change that to a 42 and then rewrite your symbol, and this becomes 306.6, right? Because your decimal ends up right there in between these 2 6s. And so if you rewrite your new problem, it looks like this. Now remember from the last problem, it's very important that wherever the decimal ends up inside that symbol, that you put that decimal directly above it, keeping it in a vertical column with this number right here so that you don't mess up your final answer. And so now here's the point where you want to ask yourself the question. Really what you'd want to do is say, how many times, or what do I multiply 42 by to get 30 without going over? Well, 30 is too small, right? You can't multiply anything by 42. 42 is higher than 30. So now you're going to actually have to consider 306. And this is where you really probably want to use a calculator a little bit anyway, even if you're doing it by hand. So you'd say, what do I multiply 42 by to get a number real close to 306 without going over? A calculator might help you to kind of figure out what that number is, but the answer here is 7. Okay, so if you put a 7 there, and then, you know, you could take the calculator here and you could say, okay, well, what is 7 times 42? 7 times 42 gives you 294. Okay, so you get a 294. So 294 goes right here. I mean, you could do this by hand, but that might be a little bit annoying. So 306 minus 294, you end up getting a 12, right? You get a 12. And so now you bring down your 6 and you say, how many times does 42 go into 126? Or what can I multiply 42 by to get a number really close to 126 without going over? And the answer there is 3, and it actually works out perfectly. If you multiply 3 times 42, you actually do get 126. And so your remainder is a 0. And so your final answer ends right there. It's a 7.3. Same thing we got just using the calculator at the beginning. Remember though, just a quick reminder, if you don't get a remainder of 0 and your problem is all done, you have to add zeros and keep adding zeros and bringing them down until this decimal either ends, until you get a remainder of 0, or until this decimal starts repeating itself over and over and over. And then you can use that repeating symbol that we'll get to soon. Okay, so that concludes our discussion on like doing it by hand, but I do want to continue to do some of these in the calculator. You might be thinking, why do we need to practice any more of these with the calculator? We know how to use the calculator. And yes, I totally get that, but I just want to make sure everyone feels good about the order in which you put them in the calculator, because my math lab will ask you these questions in different ways. So for example 3, here's actually a real easy way they could ask you. Example 3 looks like this: 8.304 divided by, I'll use parentheses because I'm using a negative number, divided by negative 16. Well, probably everyone watching this video knows how to put this in the calculator, because it just goes in the exact order that you see this in, okay? So you're just gonna go 8.304 divided by negative 16. Make sure you use negative and not minus. Sometimes calculators are picky about that. When you do that, this comes out to a perfect answer. It comes out to negative 0.519. Negative 0.519. Okay, so hopefully you got that if you're using your calculator and following along with me. And that's all. So it did not tell us to round, so we can move on. All right, example number 4. Let me line up my page here. Here we go. All right, example number 4. All right, what about something like this? They could actually use the word divide in the problem. You'll probably see one like this. Divide negative 4.2 by negative 0.6. Okay, so you're dividing two negatives. Probably, hopefully, a lot of you know just from looking at it, you're like, oh, I know my answer is going to be positive, because if you're dividing two negatives, two of the same symbol, you're going to get a positive. If you didn't know that, or if you forgot that, no big deal. Your calculator will do it for you. So on the calculator, you're just going to enter it in the order that you see it in, if it's written like this as like a sentence. So you're going to go negative 4.2 divided by negative 0.6, and of course you're going to hit the equal sign, and when you do that, it will give you a positive 7. Okay, so positive 7. Okay, example 5. You could see something written as a fraction. 1.215 divided by 0.027. Okay, now usually this is considered bad form. You don't usually want decimals in fractions, but if they're giving you a problem like this, and you probably will see one like this, that's okay. You just have to go ahead and divide. So on the calculator, I think you guys know this and probably remember this, you just do top divided by bottom. So 1.215 numerator divided by denominator, and then of course hit equals, and it comes out to a nice 45. That's your final answer. Again, I hope you're doing this with me on the calculator and you're checking yourself to make sure that you're putting everything in right. So you're going to get 45 for that one. All right, let's do another one. And this time I am going to throw some rounding in at you. It's a good review from lesson 12. Plus they will do this to you in lesson 13 homework as well a little bit. So divide 0.549 divided by 0.0 0.023, and then I'm going to say, and round the quotient. Remember, quotient just means answer when you're dividing. So, and round the quotient to the nearest hundredth. To the nearest hundredth. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and do that. When you do that in the calculator, let's write down again what we're going to do. The order is self-explanatory. It's just what you see there in that exact order. So you're going to take your calculator. You're going to go 0.549 divided by 0.023, hit equals. And when you do that, you should all get this number. It should be like 23.86956522174. I mean, it kind of keeps going, and it depends. Every calculator is a little different for how many decimals it shows. Not every calculator shows, 10 or 8 or 12 decimal. Every calculator is a little different. So your calculator might chop it off a little sooner than mine did, but this is the number that your calculator should give you when you put it in, or at least most of these digits. And since it said round your answer to the nearest hundredth, you need to ask yourself which digit here is in the hundredths place. And it's this one right here. Remember, the hundredths place is 2 places past the decimal on the right. So you just go 1, 2, there it is. And this is the number we care about right here, this 9. Since this 9 is a 5 or higher, this 6 is gonna go up 1. So our final answer is going to be 23.87. Okay, since they told us to round, 23.87 final answer. All right, let's do one more like this where we're dividing and rounding, and then we will move on to a slightly different topic. Okay, so example 7. Example 7, how about this one? Divide 0.0453 by 0.98. Okay, and this time I'm going to say, and round the quotient, and round the quotient, I'm going to write it like this way, 3 decimal places. I noticed that my math lab does this on at least 1, maybe 2 questions that you're going to come across in the homework. They don't always say round to the hundredths or round to the tenths, round to the thousandths. Sometimes they'll just say round to 3 decimal places. Okay, now 3 decimal places, hopefully you all know this, that's the same thing as the thousandths place. But I just wanted to show it to you in a different way because you're going to see it in a different way on my math lab. Again, I always try to cover every base, every possible type of situation you could see. So if it helps you, you could write in parentheses here next to it that 3 decimal places means the thousandths place. Okay, so on the calculator, what you want to enter in for this one is just simply 0.0453 divided by 0.98. Okay, so you're just going to put it in that exact same order, and then what you end up getting is approximately, you're going to get 0.04622448979, and then the number keeps going, but calculators most of the time will chop it off here or even a little sooner than this. So this is the number you should get when you divide those 2 numbers. And again, you're rounding 3 decimal places. So 1, 2, 3. So you're rounding right there. 3 decimal places is the thousandths place. And I'm going to put a box around the number directly to the right of it. And you ask yourself, is this number a 5 or higher? Well, no, it's not. It's lower. So that means this 6 right here stays the same. It does not go up 1. So your final answer for this one is 0.046. Okay, great. All right, so that's division. That's going to be like the first chunk of the homework that you're going to come across. And then right after that, they're going to give you several problems where you have to convert fractions as decimals. You're going to have to convert them into decimals, change fractions into decimals. So let's talk about how to do that. Maybe let's write a little note down here that might help you as you go along. So let's say to write a fraction as a decimal. All right, to write a fraction as a decimal, this is seriously all you do. Divide numerator, or in other words, the number on top, divided by denominator. The number on the bottom, right? That's all you do. You divide numerator divided by denominator. Very straightforward, very simple. And I'll put in parentheses here because probably all of us will do this, or at least most of us. We will use our calculator. So I would say divide the numerator by the denominator on the calculator. Just use your calculator, top divided by bottom, very simple. Or I'm also going to put an or here because there's another very simple way to do this if you're using a calculator, and it has to be either scientific or graphing to be able to do this next part. But we've discussed this before. Or use the F to D, D to F key on the calculator. So use the F to D, D to F key on the calculator after putting in the fraction. After putting in the fraction. Okay, so you have a couple options here. If they give you a fraction, and you're gonna see that in the homework, you're gonna see it several times. When they give you a fraction, you can either just take your calculator and do top divided by bottom equals, and there's your answer, very easy. Or you can put the fraction in using the ABC key. You guys are very familiar with that. Put the fraction in using this ABC key. Whatever the fraction might be, whether it's a mixed number or just a regular old fraction, then you're gonna hit second PRB, because remember, right above the PRB is that F to D, D to F. Remember what that means. That means fraction to decimal, decimal to fraction. So if you're putting in a fraction, it's gonna give you a decimal. If you're putting in a decimal, it will give you a fraction. So again, if you put in a fraction using the ABC key, and then you go second PRB, that's gonna give you the decimal version of your fraction. And then you won't have to do anything else. You're done. So use either method. Both are pretty much the same as far as quickness, as long as you have that option on your calculator. Remember, those of you who have the graphing calculator, let's say we'll do a very simple example. Let's do 1/2. Let me clear this out. 1 divided by 2. So I'm just putting in the number 1/2. Remember what you have to do. You have to hit this key here, math, and then you have to hit option number 1. So you hit enter, 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 and then enter again. And it gives you, oh, nope. Oops, I apologize. Nope, let's try, I actually picked the wrong option there. And I have glare, so sorry about that. But let's try that again. 1 divided by 2. You're gonna have to go into math and actually pick option number 2. What I did there is I picked option 1, which just makes you go from a fraction to a fraction. That's pointless. So we're gonna go to option 2 where it says, turn it into a decimal. So go down 1 to 2, and then you're gonna hit enter, enter. There you go. And then you get 0.5. Okay, so it gives you the decimal version of 1/2. So that's how you're gonna do that in the graphing calculator. And again, those of you with Casios or some other form of calculator, if you're having any trouble at all figuring out your calculator, you can feel free to, of course, Google it. That might be easier, or shoot me an email and I'll try to be as specific as I can when I email you back and walk you through how to do it. All right, so let's do some practice now with this. Let's go ahead and do some examples, and this is what your My Math Lab questions will look like. It'll say, write each number as a decimal. Write each number as a decimal. And I'm gonna write one thing in parentheses here. Use this bar over numbers to indicate repeating. Okay, so that's that bar that I referred to earlier. I was mentioning, and you guys probably all remember this from back in the day when you first studied decimals, but sometimes you're gonna have decimals that repeat, and sometimes the entire decimal repeats, sometimes just part of it repeats, but whatever part of it repeats, you need to make sure that you're putting this bar over any and all numbers that repeat. We will do a few examples, so don't worry, but I just wanted to make sure that that is clear. We're gonna start using that bar over numbers to indicate repeating. Now in My Math Lab, I don't believe there is an option to use that repetend bar. There might be, but if not, I can assure you that I believe every single one of these problems in the homework is a multiple choice question, and so they'll give you a bunch of options with the bar. and you have to pick the right one. I will also tell you that they try to trick you, which is super annoying. They really do. They try to trick you. Sometimes they put a bar over 2 numbers, sometimes 3 numbers, sometimes 1 number, and you have to be so careful to pick the exact amount of numbers and the exact numbers that you're looking for to repeat. So just be very careful. It's very easy to make a mistake. It's like they're trying to get you guys to get it wrong. I don't like that, but it does happen. So just be very aware of that. All right, so here we go. Example number 1. Again, the directions say write each number as a decimal. So let's start off with 17/25. All right, 17 over 25. You could do this by hand, by dividing, but that can get a little bit annoying. So if I were you guys, I would just take your calculator and either put it in using the ABC key and then hit second PRB, that F to D, D to F key, and equals, and it will give you the answer, or just do 17 divided by 25 equals. Now, when you do that, you should get 0.68. So again, I hope you're doing this with me as you're watching the video. 0.68 is the final answer. All right, let's try this one. -1/3. -1/3. This might be one that some of you guys have memorized. I don't know. But let's try -1/3. Now, if the original fraction form was negative, then you know right away your answer is going to be negative. So if you don't want to put the negative in your calculator, if you're like, I don't really like looking for the negative key, just don't feel like it, you don't have to. Just go ahead and put it in your answer, set it up, and just do the 1/3 in your calculator. That's up to you. But when you do this, when you do 1 divided by 3 equals, you actually end up getting -0.333333, and your calculator probably just fills it up all the way with 3's. And so in this case, since our directions said use the bar over numbers to indicate repeating, we don't want to leave our answer like that, and we definitely don't want to round. If they don't tell us to round, we cannot round. They will mark it wrong in my math lab. So what you want to do is go negative point, and you want to ask yourself, which numbers are repeating? Well, in this case, all of them are repeating. It's just 3 all the time. That's the only number that keeps going. So you're just going to go -0.3, and you're going to put a bar over the 3, and that's your final answer. And you really only want to write one of the 3's. You don't want to do more than that because it's just not mathematically how we would write things in the best way. So you just pick 1 3 since they're all the same, and then you put a bar over it. So that would be your final answer for that one. So again, be very careful when you're picking your multiple choice answer, because my math lab will be kind of tricky sometimes. All right, example number 3. How about this one? 9/11, or in other words, 9 divided by 11. When you do that and hit equals on your calculator, you should get 0.8181818181, and it's going to keep going. Now, I will point out to you right now that it is possible that your calculator might go 81818181, and then it might end 82, and you might be thinking, wait a second, this number doesn't repeat. There's a 2 in it. So I can't just put a bar over the 8 and the 1 because there's a 2 in it. I want to caution you, be very careful. Because calculators can only fit a certain amount of numbers in the screen, they end up rounding. They always round the last number. And so here's the thing, think about it. If your calculator has to chop off right here, let's say this is as far as your calculator can go. If your calculator is going to end there, what's the next number? It's an 8, right? You guys know it's an 8 because it's 81818181 keeps going. So the next number is an 8. So think about it. That number right there is a 5 or higher. So that's going to turn this 1 into a 2. So what your calculator is doing is it's rounding. So be very, very careful. If the last number is the only number that's different, and you notice a pattern until the last number, ask yourself, did my calculator round here? Is it possible that they rounded? Because likely that's what happened. If that number, that last number, is only 1 higher than the pattern that you see, and you know that that next number was a 5 or higher, you know your calculator rounded. So just be super, super careful. So the answer for this one is actually 0.81 with a bar over the 8 and the 1. Now, I just did something that I was going to warn you guys not to do. I started to do it. I got a little too close. you want to try really hard not to make your bar go over the decimal. Really, the bar should only go over. So I'm not really taking my own advice here. Sorry, guys. But yeah, you want to make sure that that repeating bar really only goes over the numbers that are repeating. Because if you accidentally go over too many numbers, you have the wrong answer now. And it is possible you could have a number over here in front of the decimal. You'll see that actually in a few moments. And when that happens, if this bar goes over that number, now you actually are writing an incorrect answer. So you just want to be really careful. So since this one goes 8, 1, 8, 1, 8, 1, 8, 1, you need the bar over the 8 and the 1. Final answer. Okay, let's try example number 4. Example number 4 is a really good one. It kind of covers some tricky things that you might see in the homework. So this one is -11/12 or -11/12. So when you put this in the calculator, again, you know your answer is going to be negative, right? So really all you need to worry about doing is 11 divided by 12. When you do that, 11 divided by 12, you're going to get 0.916666666, and it keeps going. Now remember, your calculator might end with a 7. I'm going to put a question mark over it. Your calculator will likely end in a 7, and it might make you think, oh, this does not repeat because it ends in a 7. But remember, that's only because it rounds, and this number really is a 6, and the next one is a 6. And so since this number right here is a 5 or higher, this one goes up 1 and turns into a 7. So your calculator's rounding, just be very, very careful. So this actually is a repeating decimal, and so your final answer is going to be -0.916. And here's where I would ask you guys, where would you put the bar in this one? I hope none of you would say over the 916, because the 916 does not repeat. Only the 6 repeats. So we only want the bar over the 6. It's the only part that keeps going and repeats itself. So that's your final answer. And this is the type of problem that my math lab would love to try to trick you on. Again, it's super annoying, so be very aware of that with your multiple choice answers. Okay, example 5. How about this one? I'm giving you our first mixed number where you have to convert that into a decimal. Well, here's the good news. This is not really any harder. So remember a moment ago we talked about 2 different methods. If you're using the ABC method on your calculator, all you have to do here is just go 4 ABC 7, ABC 8, and then use the second PRB key, which is the F to D, D to F key, and then hit equals. And when you do that, it will give you the entire final answer. However, if you're doing the method where you do top divided by bottom, and that's totally cool, you can use that. If you're doing that method, then just remember to bring the 4 down as part of your answer, because the 4 here is a whole number part of this mixed number. So that means the 4 will also be a whole number part in your decimal. So all you still need to do is just 7 divided by 8. You can kind of pretend like the 4 is not even there as long as you make sure you put it in your answer. So it's going to be 4 point something. And so here's where you just take your calculator and you go 7 divided by 8 equals. And when you do that, you get 0.875. And so that is your final answer, 4.875. Okay, great. Hopefully that made sense. Let's try one more like that where we have a mixed number. Let's do this one. And this time I'm also going to throw a little rounding at you. So round 5 7/11 to the nearest 10th. Okay, so they're telling us where to round. They're giving us a mixed number. You have to convert it into a decimal. So again, we know that because there's a 5 here, my answer is going to be 5 point something. And here's where you want to go. 7 divided by 11 equals, and what you're going to get is 0.636363. 363. Okay, it keeps going. You get the idea. Now again, your calculator, depending on where it chops it off, it could end in a 4. If it's a 4 here, that just means they rounded your 3 because the next number is a 6 and that makes this a 4. So don't let that scare you. Some of your calculators might chop it off right there at the 3 and that's great. Or maybe it ends at a 6. Some of your calculators might go to a 6 and that's fine too. But just note that it is repeating here. All right. Repeating doesn't necessarily matter that much in this problem because you'll notice the directions said round to the nearest 10th. So be very careful. If the directions tell you to round, do not write 5.63 with the bar over the 6.3 for your final answer. Even though that is correct, they're telling us to round to the nearest tenth. So you want to say, okay, the tenths place here is the 6 right there. And so I'm just going to look right here, directly to the right of it. I see that it's a 3. That means it's less than a 5. So that means this 6 right here does not change. So my final answer is 5.6, rounded to the nearest tenth. Okay, great. All right, and let's maybe, you know what, I think I did just say I'll do one more, but there is a reason why I want to do this last one. There is one more that I have in my head that I kind of want to do with you guys. What about something like this? Round 8 2/3. I'll say to the nearest, oh, let's just do thousandth. Okay, so what about something like this? Round 8 2/3 to the nearest thousandth. So for this one, okay, if you remember to bring your 8 down because it's a whole number, and then point, and then you just do 2 divided by 3. Some of you might have this one memorized. 2 divided by 3 is 0.66666. Keeps going, right? Again, you might see a 7 at the end of your calculator. You probably do. But this one is just 8.6 with the bar over the 6. The 6 goes forever and ever. Now, since it said round to the nearest thousandth, you want to make sure that you're writing out at least 4 digits when you copy this from your calculator. If you just wrote 8.6 and chopped it off there, that would be really hard to like do the rounding part. So you want to make sure that you're writing at least 4 digits so that you're going to the thousands place and at least 1 past it. And the reason why, of course, is because the 1 past it is super important. You want to ask yourself, is it a 5 or higher? Yes, it is. It's a 6, so therefore this number right here is going to go up 1. So that means your final answer is 8.667. Final answer for that one, rounded to the nearest thousandth. So I just wanted you guys to be aware of that. Okay, let me look ahead here a little bit. Okay, this is a great place to chop off our video. So I'm going to stop it here and I'll start part 2 in just a moment.